Thousands of years ago, something happened in the sky that should have been impossible. In the middle of a brutal war, a man looked up at the sun and commanded it to stop. Not slow down, not hide behind the clouds, but stop, completely. The battlefield was covered in dust. Soldiers were fighting for their lives. The enemy was escaping into the mountains, and darkness was coming. If night fell, the war would be lost. So the leader of Israel did something no human had ever dared to do. He raised his voice toward heaven and said, "Sun, stand still over Gibeon, and moon, stop over the valley of Ajalon." What happened next shocked everyone. According to the ancient record, the sun stopped moving, the moon froze in the sky, and daylight continued far longer than it should have. Was this a miracle? A mystery of the universe? Or one of the most misunderstood events ever recorded in the Bible? Tonight, we uncover the incredible story of Joshua and the day the sun stood still. Long before this strange miracle in the sky, the land of Canaan was already trembling with fear. The Israelites had finally entered the Promised Land. Under the leadership of Joshua, they had begun conquering the powerful cities of the region. First came Jericho, a city with walls so massive that enemies believed it could never fall. Yet the walls collapsed in a single day. Then came Ai, another stronghold that was defeated. Word spread quickly across the land. Kings, warriors, and entire nations began to whisper the same terrifying rumor. The God of Israel is fighting for them. Fear spread like wildfire across Canaan. But one group made a surprising decision. The people of Gibeon knew they could never defeat Israel in battle. Instead of fighting, they chose deception. They disguised themselves as travelers from a distant land. Their clothes were worn. The message from Gibeon arrived in the middle of the night. The city was surrounded. 5 kings had joined forces. 5 massive armies were marching toward one target. Gibeon. The leaders of the city begged for help. "Do not abandon us. Come quickly, save us." Joshua read the message carefully. He knew exactly what it meant. If Gibeon fell, the alliance of kings would grow stronger. Soon the entire land of Canaan could unite against Israel. But if Joshua marched to defend Gibeon, he would be walking straight into a trap. 5 armies, thousands of warriors, a battle that could destroy everything. Yet Joshua had already sworn an oath to protect them, and that promise had been made before God. Breaking it was not an option. So Joshua made a bold decision. He would attack immediately. No delay, no waiting for daylight, no time to prepare. He gathered his best warriors, the mighty men of Israel, soldiers hardened by battle, and under the cover of darkness, they began marching. The journey from Gilgal to Gibeon was not easy. It was a steep and dangerous path through mountains. Sharp rocks cut into their sandals. Cold night winds blew across the hills. But the army kept moving, hour after hour. No torches, no noise, only the sound of footsteps echoing through the darkness. Joshua knew something the enemy did not. They believed Israel was still far away. They believed Gibeon was alone. But by the time the sun rose, Israel would already be there. Before the dawn broke over the mountains, Joshua's army reached the hills above the battlefield. Below them, the armies of the 5 kings were spread across the valley. Thousands of soldiers, campfires glowing in the early morning darkness. They had no idea what was coming. Joshua looked over the battlefield. This was the moment. A single command could decide the fate of the war. And suddenly, a message came from God, a promise that changed everything. "Do not be afraid of them. I have given them into your hands. Not one of them will be able to stand against you." With that promise, Joshua gave the order, and as the first light of dawn touched the sky, the army of Israel charged down the mountain. The battle had begun, but what happened next would become one of the most terrifying moments the enemy had ever seen. Because the battle was not fought by Israel alone, something far more powerful was about to intervene. As the sun began to rise over the hills of Gibeon, the enemy armies were still unprepared. Many soldiers were just waking up. Others were gathering weapons. Then suddenly, a terrifying sound echoed through the valley. War cries. Joshua's army was already charging down the mountains. The Israelites struck like lightning. Swords clashed. Shields shattered. Chaos spread through the enemy camps. The 5 allied armies had expected a long siege against Gibeon. They had not expected a surprise attack from the mountains. Panic spread quickly. Commanders shouted orders. Soldiers rushed into formation. But the confusion had already begun. The battle quickly turned into a desperate retreat. The enemy soldiers began fleeing down the narrow mountain road toward Beth Horon. But something even more terrifying happened. According to the ancient account recorded in the Bible, the battle was not fought by Israel alone. As the enemy fled, the sky itself seemed to turn against them. Dark clouds gathered over the valley. Thunder roared across the hills. Then suddenly, massive stones began falling from the sky. Huge hailstones crashed onto the fleeing soldiers. Warriors who had survived the battle were struck down by the storm. The ancient record says something remarkable. More soldiers were killed by the stones from heaven than by the swords of Israel. Panic became terror. The 5 kings' armies were completely broken. Men ran in every direction, dropping shields, throwing away weapons, trying to escape the unstoppable disaster falling from the sky. Joshua's army continued the pursuit. The enemy forces were now scattered across the valleys. Victory seemed certain, but a new problem was appearing on the horizon. The sun was slowly beginning to descend. The day was ending, and Joshua realized something dangerous. If darkness came, the remaining enemy soldiers could escape into the mountains. The war would not truly be finished, and these kings would return again. So Joshua faced a moment unlike any other in history. Standing in the middle of the battlefield, with thousands of soldiers watching, he looked up toward the sky and spoke a prayer that no human had ever dared to say before. A prayer that would change the course of the battle and become one of the most mysterious events ever recorded in the Bible. Joshua raised his voice toward heaven and declared, "Sun, stand still over Gibeon, and moon, over the valley of Ajalon." What happened next would shock the entire world. The battlefield fell strangely quiet. Dust still floated in the air. The enemy armies were running in fear. Joshua stood in the middle of the valley. Thousands of soldiers were watching him. Then he looked up toward the sky. The sun was slowly moving toward the horizon. Darkness was coming. If night arrived, the remaining enemy kings would escape. The war would not truly end. So Joshua did something no human leader had ever done before. He spoke directly to the sky, in front of the entire army of Israel. Joshua raised his voice and declared, "Sun, stand still over Gibeon, and moon, stop over the valley of Ajalon." For a moment, nothing happened. The wind moved across the battlefield. Soldiers looked at each other in confusion. Then something strange began to happen. The sun stopped moving. The bright disk of light hung motionless above the mountains. The shadows on the ground stopped shifting. Time itself seemed frozen. The moon remained fixed in the sky. Daylight did not fade. Minutes passed, then more minutes. But the sun did not move. The day continued. The battlefield remained bright with light. Joshua's army looked up in awe. The enemy soldiers looked up in terror, because something impossible had just happened. According to the ancient record preserved in the Bible, the sun remained in the sky for an unusually long time, long enough for the battle to be completely finished. The fleeing armies were chased down across the valleys. The 5 kings' forces were destroyed, their power broken. The war ended that very day, and the ancient text records something astonishing. There has never been a day like it before or since, when the Lord listened to a human voice. But the story did not end there, because after the battle, Joshua still had to deal with the 5 kings who had started the war. And what happened to them next would send a powerful message to every nation in Canaan. While the battle raged across the valleys, the 5 kings who had started the war realized something terrifying. Their armies were collapsing. Soldiers were fleeing in every direction. The storm from the sky had shattered their ranks. Joshua's army was pursuing them relentlessly. The kings understood that if they were captured, their kingdoms would fall. So they ran, not toward their armies, but toward the hills near the city of Makkedah. There, they found a cave hidden among the rocks. Desperate and terrified, the 5 kings crawled inside. They believed the darkness of the cave would hide them, but the battlefield was full of witnesses. Soon a report reached Joshua. The 5 kings have been found. They are hiding in a cave at Makkedah. Joshua did not rush to the cave immediately. The battle was not fully finished. The enemy armies were still fleeing. So Joshua gave a surprising command. Roll large stones over the mouth of the cave. Guard it, but do not stop chasing the enemy. Massive stones were pushed across the entrance. The kings were trapped inside. Meanwhile, the army of Israel continued the pursuit. All across the valleys, the fleeing armies were defeated. Cities were captured. Strongholds were destroyed. By the end of the day, the enemy forces had completely collapsed. Only then did Joshua return to the cave. The stones were rolled away. The 5 kings were brought out. They were the rulers of powerful cities: Jerusalem, Hebron, Jarmuth, Lachish, and Eglon. Only hours earlier, they had commanded massive armies. Now they stood defeated before Israel. Joshua gathered the leaders of his army. Then he gave a symbolic command. Come here. Put your feet on the necks of these kings. One by one, the commanders stepped forward. They placed their feet on the necks of the defeated rulers. It was a powerful sign. The power of the enemy had been broken. Joshua then spoke words that his soldiers would never forget. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. Be strong and courageous, because this is what the Lord will do to all the enemies you fight. That day became legendary, not just because of the victory, but because something happened that no generation had ever seen before. The day the sun stopped moving in the sky, and the world witnessed a miracle that would be remembered for thousands of years. For centuries, people have wondered about that day. Did the sun really stop in the sky? Did the earth somehow stop spinning? Or was something else happening that humans still cannot fully understand? The ancient account recorded in the Bible describes the event in a simple but powerful way. The sun stood still and the moon stopped, until the nation took vengeance on its enemies. According to the text, the daylight continued far longer than normal, long enough for the battle to be completely finished. Many historians and scholars have debated this moment for generations. Some believe it was a supernatural miracle. Others suggest that God may have slowed time itself. Some have even speculated about unusual astronomical events. But the ancient writers were not trying to explain science. They were describing what they saw: a day that refused to end, a sun that seemed frozen above the battlefield, a moment when heaven itself seemed to intervene in human history. And the ancient record adds something remarkable. There has never been a day like it before or since, when the Lord listened to a human voice. To the people who witnessed it, there was no doubt about what had happened. They believed God had fought for them, and that belief would shape the history of Israel for generations. The story of that battle is not just about war. It is about faith. Joshua did not command the sun to stop because he believed he had power over the universe. He spoke those words because he trusted the power of God. He believed that nothing was impossible for the one who created the heavens. And according to the ancient story, God answered. The sun stood still. The battle was finished. And Israel survived one of the most dangerous wars in its early history. For thousands of years, people have read this story and asked the same question. What does it mean for us today? Perhaps the message is simple. Sometimes the challenges in life feel impossible. The battle seems too large. The enemy seems too strong. And time seems to be running out. But the story reminds believers of something powerful. The same God who created the sun can also command it. And if he can move the heavens, then nothing in our lives is truly impossible. That is why the day the sun stood still is still remembered as one of the most astonishing moments ever recorded in the Bible.